Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In this second talk on the series of the meanings of our dua, it would be important to look at a brief history of our present dua, which is in Arabic. Some members of the Ismaili Jamaat may not be aware that our present dua in Arabic was actually introduced in the time of Hazrat Maulana Sultan Muhammad Shah Salawatullahi alayhi, and that first in 1956 it was introduced in the countries of Africa where the Jamaat was living at that time, as well as in Syria, and then in a staggered way it was introduced in India and Pakistan in 1963. And more recently, when the Ismaili Jamaat of Badakhshan, Tajikistan emerged, then it was introduced in 1995 after Maulana Hazar Imam gave his first mulaqat to the Jamaats of Central Asia in Gorno-Badakhshan, Tajikistan. Today, every Jamaat, wherever they live geographically, they all recite the 6 parts of Arabic dua with 6 prostrations. It is very interesting to know that in the Indian subcontinent tradition, we used to recite a very long dua in Gujarati, which had been composed by Pir Sadruddin, and later Pirs had made some modifications, even to the extent that we believe that Pir Shahabuddin Shah, the older brother of Maulana Sultan Muhammad Shah, who was the last but one Zahiri or separate Pir, who had made some adjustments to that Gujarati dua. And that dua was very long, and it had 17 prostrations. What is an important point here is that this change in the language and the length of the dua is demonstration of the fact that Islam is a dynamic religion, and especially in the Ismaili Tariqa, we believe that the Imam of the time has the prerogative to change the rites and practices as the times around us are changing. We believe, according to the Quranic ayat, which we recite in the second part of our dua, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ati'ullaha wa ati'ur rasul wa ulil amri minkum. The concept of ulil amr for us, which is so firmly grounded in the Holy Quran, shows that we must follow the guidance of the possessors of the command, the possessors of the divine command, who are present in every time. There is a very clear statement of this in a foreword which Maulana Sultan Muhammad Shah Salawatullahi alayhi had written in the book Muhammad, A Mercy to All the Nations, by Al-Hajj Qasim Ali Jairazbai. And I'm going to quote from this because this is a very important statement. Maula says, and I quote, "We maintain that the Prophet only ordered prayer, fasting, and gentleness in all human relations, kindliness and consideration for all beasts and animals, from the smallest worm to the largest mammal. By the institution of the Ulil Amr, who can be interpreted as Imam and Caliph, and by placing obedience to Ulil Amr immediately after that to God and the Prophet, he ensured that the faith would ever remain living, extending, developing with science, knowledge, art, and industry. Close quotation marks. We see here the statement that because Islam is the religion of nature, Dyna fitra, and we see that in nature there is continuous dynamism, that nothing is static, everything is moving, natural things are dynamic, society is dynamic. Therefore, in Islam, religion also has to be dynamic. And to keep religion dynamic, to keep religion in line with the changing circumstances, there is the need to have the Ulil Amr, the possessor of the divine command, who is the direct descendant of the Holy Prophet. And his presence and his living guidance is what keeps the Ismaili Tariqah dynamic. Later on, in the same foreword, Maulana Sultan Muhammad Shah also says that it is the same Prophet who advises his followers ever to remain Ibnul Waqt, that is, children of the time and period in which they were on earth. And it must be the natural ambition of every Muslim to practice and represent his faith according to the standard of the waqt or space-time. And this phrase, Ibnul Waqt, the children of the time, meaning Ismailis are encouraged to practice their faith in the context in which they live. And this is a very important notion, because if we try to practice the faith as it was practiced 1400 or 2000 or 3000 years ago, then it is more than likely that the faith would become a burden and we would not be able to maintain the practice as it should be. Whereas where there is the guidance of the Ulil Amr or the Imam of the time, then this faith is living, extending, and developing with science, knowledge, art, and industry. And it is possible for the believers of that faith, for the adherents, for the followers of that faith, to practice their faith with comfort and confidence. The second point in this short talk is the actual structure of our dua. Our dua is composed of 6 parts. Each of them begins with Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, and each of them finishes with Allahumma laka sujudi wa ta'ati. Each part consists of, to begin with, either a Quranic surah, as we have in part 1, the Suratul Fatiha, and in part 6, Suratul Ikhlas, or, as in the case of the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th part, we start with a Quranic ayat, and the rest of the parts are composed of supplicatory prayers. Very, very intensive, very profound supplicatory prayers. And it is our aim in this series to take each part and go through them one at a time, and to take first of all the correct pronunciation, and then to look at the literal meaning, and finally to look at the esoteric or the batini meaning, and also bring in, wherever possible, the concept which is represented in that Quranic ayat or surah, as well as the meanings of the supplicatory prayers, which are the rest of the parts. Ya Ali Madad.